All right. So you all are official. So you can only say terrible things to me and nobody else. All right. So as people come in, it's just basically looks like Carrie is listening in. So Carrie, you get a audience. You guys focusing on you, even though you're not going to be part of the visual conversation. I am going to take my. It's hot in here now. Okay. So I want to say a prayer for us, and then like I said to Jim and Lisa, and now to John, I'm just going to kind of go through my hot takes on the day, and then welcome kind of contributions, feedback, etc. So let's pray. God, we thank you for the ways you have led us here to this day. We thank you for governance at the diocesan level. May the decisions we make bring glory to you, and may we be needful of the minds of others and everything that we do. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And I'd like to wish.
Hello, Mary Louise. You made it.
Good morning. Oh, am I?
I see you.
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to get unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you well.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Okay, so like I said a moment ago, I am gonna, and I welcome you chiming in, because I don't think I have I should have pulled this up, the actual agenda of the day. But the day started with work. We all got registered, and the day started with worship. And then we had multiple reports throughout the day. So each of the diocesan canons have different roles that they report out on. I'm not going to go through every blow by blow, but the canon to the ordinary reported out, the canon for adult formation reported out. So they gave interspersed throughout the day. They gave basically the state of the state for what the diocese is doing. Legislatively, we dealt with 5 resolutions, and we had 2 surprise visitors. Rabbi Jonathan Singer came and spoke to the convention, and also Nancy Pelosi came and spoke to the convention, or part 2 outside of convention. The one thing I don't know is I couldn't hear her to save my life, so I have no idea what she said. Lisa or Jim, were you within earshot of what she was saying?
Look, if you couldn't hear it, I'm sure I couldn't hear it. So
yeah, I kind of was there for a little bit of it, and she was just kind of espousing, thanking Bishop Mark for what he's done. I think there was some recognition of some supporters there, both for Bishop Mark as well as the city. Talked there. The other one was something about the Episcopalians being both godly and scientific. I think in relation to Bishop Mark's work on the environment.
That's good. I like that.
But otherwise, it was like not a great sound system, and I was like, okay, I can't understand half the things she's saying, and I'm going to see if the cathedral's warmed up any more than it was.
Lunch was extremely cold. Yeah, Mary Louise.
She also presented us with the bishop with some kind of a thing about his work with the environment and all of that, and how happy she was about that.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what it was called, though. It was some kind of anyway, it was presented to the bishop.
Right. A
big thing.
Yeah, and that was sort of a surprise visit during lunchtime. So immediately after they reconvened us for lunch, and correct me if I got the timing wrong, but the rabbi then came and immediately spoke to us like we had lunch. We were addressed by the rabbi, and then we sort of went back to regular business. Is that fair for those who were paying attention?
Yeah.
So
yes, I was impressed with Jonathan Singer's presentation. Since we were back in the cathedral, I could hear some of that, and I'm trying to find the resolution, the courtesy resolution that was submitted, and I can't find that either.
I could not find that. you can go back and if you watch the YouTube stream, you can watch all of this stuff. So you can't. I don't think Nancy Pelosi's talk is online, but I know Rabbi Singer's is.
Well, Mary Louise was saying that
It
Like-
was online, yeah.
Oh, it is okay.
it,
Then you're ahead of us, Mary Louise.
It was on the, I don't know if it was
Live stream.
online. It came up on my telephone
Huh, okay.
and.
Well, then I'm stand corrected. That stuff.
And
is
I
in-
was surprised. I was surprised because I didn't know it was going to be there. So I was happy to see it. And then John Owen also sent me an email with everything on it.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Only-
Okay,
Of course,
so
can't find it.
I'm jumping around, but I think there's a reason I'm jumping around. So we passed resolutions out of order. So like 5 was or like 4 was moved to the first place and da 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 da. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go one by one. I just think it's easier to follow after the
Okay.
fact. So resolution 1 was migration with dignity. They had a woman speak about her migration experience that was really heartfelt
powerful.
and powerful and heartbreaking. We largely passed it without too much.
Yeah, no, that was one of those. There was very little discussion. It was like, I think 3 people said yes, 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 and then we said vote.
The vote on that was 222 in favor and 4 opposed. Have no idea who those 4 people would be.
Yeah,
Lisa, that happened several times, and I'm just wondering if that was a technical just inability, because there was 4 several times. So either it was a glitch or somebody was voting and they didn't know what they were voting on.
Yeah.
Because
That was-
a couple of those were like, you're opposed to this? It didn't make sense.
yeah, there was another one where I think there were only 3 opposed, and I'm going, who were the 3 numbskulls?
Well, I don't want to say
Okay.
numbskulls. I just wonder if there's technical issues.
It may have been that unless you voted in the affirmative, you were a negative. So if you had trouble logging in,
Maybe.
you
Maybe.
were not in favor of, and so that might have been the other one. Having been on the resolutions committee with that, there was a ton of work back and forth on that one. Nothing in opposition to it, but working to tweak it and make sure that it had as much weight as it could. As with all of the resolutions that were proposed, there was an effort to make them applicable to both the diocese as it goes to general convention, but also to individual Episcopalians within the diocese to support their work in these areas. So there is language in all of them that would empower someone in their personal ministry in that regard. The only thing that came up with this one towards the end was that there had not been a discussion with the with El Buen Pastor. And so they were, hold on. There was no discussion with the parishioners at El Buen Pastor until quite near the end. And they were concerned that there might be the people other than the persons with actual experiences might be making decisions or representations on their behalf, which would have where they would like to get more input.
Mhm.
So they were consulted and were happy with the final draft of the resolution. But I think that's one of those things where sometimes we want to do things on behalf of people and forget to ask those people, what do they want? But that was rectified.
Okay, that was great. And I'm glad you got those numbers for reporting out. So resolution 2 was addressing gun violence and to safeguard our youth. It was lock your guns up in your cabinet, people. But it was in a specific context. When I first read this, I thought, that doesn't make sense to me. Of course you should lock up your guns, but it was written by a teenager in Oakland who was dealing with specific violence in her community. She spoke powerfully, she spoke eloquently, and most of us, all of us were like, of course we support this. The part where the debate sort of ensued and was people didn't feel like it went far enough. And this is my opinion. I'm not, and please correct me if you share, I'm going beyond what was actually there. There was a group that says, well, we need to append this to have an assault weapon ban. And so that suggested amendment was debated, and people were standing up to say that's beyond the scope of this resolution. We need to honor this teenager's work. And so a lot of any controversy that was there was really around whether to amend the lock up your gun resolution to include making a stand against assault weapons. That resolution, that amendment to the resolution failed.
Yes.
And then we went back to the original and passed it. Lisa, what was our numbers for passing that one?
The amendment failed, 30 yes, 193 no. And the resolution itself passed 206 yes, 3 no. And I think you're right. The real thought behind this was to support the St. Paul's Oakland youth who drafted this, and make sure that their voice was heard and that they felt heard in the legislative process. It also is part of there's a California law that now requires school districts to provide safe gun guidelines for parents at least once a year. And there was discussion in the resolutions committee and with St. Paul's Oakland about making certain that that this resolution was presented in all of the dioceses, in all of the parishes, along with the safe gun resolutions that the state requires from school districts, because it is a state law now. And I think a lot of people may not understand what the requirements of that are. So
that was good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Resolution 3 was sort of a laundry list of themes and goals and markers that we want to bring to general convention next year. I honestly don't remember. I know there was lots of talk back and forth, but I kind of got lost. What was the general vibe of the conversation / debate around this resolution?
I kind of joined you, Todd. I was like getting a little bit. What are we exactly? What's going on here?
Was anybody not lost? And if you were, please speak up.
there was an amendment proposed regarding adding family issues to church vitality. And that was added. And that passed 198 to 51. The resolution itself, as amended, passed 227 to 15.
That's great. So just as a reminder, all this is on the website. So if you're like going, what the heck are we talking about? Please refer to the website. I'm not rehashing each resolution nor reading them. So at any point you can kind of go back, and if you really are interested, you can match up what we're talking about to the text of the resolution.
And again, this one was drafted with the understanding that should someone in the diocese have a personal ministry, they would also be able to utilize this to show that their position in whatever, whether, housing issues or whatever, was supported by the diocese itself.
Totally. Resolution number 4, add Howard Thurman to the Episcopal Church calendar. That also had some discussion. Most of it was positive, if not all of it.
Yeah. I think there was one of more questions of who is this person and why is he relevant to the Episcopalians?
Right. So largely it was there was an educational component to the discussion. Lisa, what did it pass by? What was can you report out the numbers?
This one passed 247 to 5. Howard Thurman has a lot of Bay Area connections, and he has his book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was part of the EFM curriculum. So he's added to April 10th.
I
as it,
think that was the other question that came up was, so what day are we giving him? Usually being it's his birthday, or is there some other specific date that we're gonna do?
So
April
Lisa, you said April 10th.
April 10th.
Cool. Okay, before I'm going to skip to resolution 5 in a second, but I think it's helpful to take a moment to understand what's happening. Just last little bit of kitchen cabinet stuff. We passed the budget, so that is now official. I don't see much discussion needed for that necessarily, but resolution 5 came in later than the nominating committee typically accepts. So resolution 5 had to be voted into discussion by two-thirds. I don't know what my hands are doing. 2/3 of the people had to vote to even enter the resolution for debate. Does that make sense to us non-nerdy delegate people? So 2/3 had to say, yes, we want to even debate this because of its timing. So there was some discussion about not even including it into the floor, but I think it passed heartily over 2/3. What was that number, Lisa, for actually putting it on the floor? Do you have that handy?
Yes, it won with 224 to 44.
And that was putting it on the floor, not the
That's
actual.
to put it on the floor.
Got it. So that put the resolution 5 onto the agenda. It was moved to the very end of the discussion. So we went well past the scheduled time. I think the convention adjourned at 6:05, somewhere in there. We weren't really discussing 5 until after the sort of scheduled time for the convention to close. So
Yeah, I was gonna say is I was looking at the agenda timeline like around 3 o'clock, just trying to figure out where we were at, and it's like, oh my gosh, how late are we gonna be here? And it was like, okay, what we're discussing right now was supposed to happen at like 1:15, and it was already after 3. And
Right.
I'm like, oh, this and Tom, are we
We were
staying?
running like
Go ahead,
an
Lisa.
hour to an hour and a half behind schedule.
pretty much the whole
the
day.
time-
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
actually, that often happens
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
conventions. I mean, it's not unusual.
But they
Yeah.
did kind of save the best for last because this one did have the most
Energy.
electricity with it.
Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
we weren't, myself and a couple other people had left early, and we were listening to it on my phone, driving through the city and across the bridge, and it's like, oh, this is. People were being very on the on the phone. It sounded very animated. I could only imagine what it was like in the cathedral.
Yeah. So are we ready to have like more fulsome conversation around 5? Before we do that, I don't want anything else to be derailed. Do you have any general questions about the resolutions, about the canon presentations, about the rabbi speaking, about Nancy Pelosi speaking, about the bishop's address, about worship? Any things that you're kind of like thinking you want to know our take on besides 5 before we go to 5?
Well, I think the amendment or the resolution to add Howard Thurman to the Episcopal calendar was appropriate because among other things, his book forms the basis of the
Sacred Ground.
uh,
Sacred Ground.
Sacred Ground discussion group. I mean, one of his books forms the basis for that. So every chapter in that book was read by the group, and it was very timely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So non-delegate people, do you have any questions of us before we jump into 5? John, I know you're interested in 5, so let's get into that. So this is my read of it, and I want you to please correct me if I am like inappropriately summarizing, but there was a person who, a Kairos minister, volunteer, whose son had been incarcerated and years before, and Kairos was very meaningful to her, and she showed up to a training, I believe, in San Rafael. And there they said, you can't be, I don't want to be too simplistic about this, but you can't be fully Christian and fully gay. And that it's not God's perfect will for you. That's
It went along the lines of Kairos or the people who are up in San Rafael were pointing out the man, God created man and woman. That's it. There is no LGBT, basically along the lines
Right.
of if you are espousing something in the LGBTQ plus community, that you're not going to be allowed to partake or
Can I make one tweak to that a little
Yeah.
bit? So that what I understood from the code of conduct that was written by Kairos that became the source of so much contention was that, for example, if you were assigned female at birth, you were to do your ministry as a female. If you were a transgender person, you could not act within the prison as a volunteer to do that work. That's the kind of the way it was presented. Is that fair? Is that fair?
If you actually go to the convention booklet, on page 65 of that booklet, it quotes some of the language that Kairos is using.
Yeah.
It quotes
Yeah,
the-
and definitely dig in. This was the most heated conversation we had of the whole day. So there's a lot of detail that I don't really want to hash out right now, but there was the people who wrote it were reading the code of conduct into the record. The people who wrote it were several people, some who had done work in prisons, some who were transgendered people. So they were both parties who had some level of experience with both of those issues. I will say from the delegate side of things, before the resolution made it to debate late in the day, many of us grabbed a guy named Jim Ward, who works.
Actually, I want to say this is Mike Oliver has known him pretty much all of his life. He'd gone to church with him. He had been his rector up in Belvedere for many years. And what this gentleman has done, he goes, no, there's no walk. He talks the walk.
Right.
He walks it, talks it, and lives it. And he goes, no, that is like, and he is very involved in prison ministries, San Quentin, Napa, and I forget there was a third.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes,
I think a lot.
A lot.
And he felt very strongly about what was that it's like, we're taking too strong of a position and with the way the resolution was written.
Yeah. So
Well,
I will say,
I think this one is also an example of when they didn't ask the people at El Buen Pastor about the immigration
good point.
resolution. I think there are a lot of interested parties, a lot of people personally affected in all aspects of things dealt with in this, that it really, I think it's going to really require a lot more in-depth conversation from all of the interested parties.
Absolutely. So Lisa, can I share a little bit of and please correct me as we go, but Lisa and I had sort of an ongoing table talk with Jim Ward around the table as we're freezing to death in the wind. So Jim was like, hey, Kairos is a typically very conservative organization, and he would later make a resolution to align this work with California state law. It did not pass. So he made an amendment late in the day to sort of align up with what we're asking ministries to do to be aligned with California state law. That failed spectacularly, I think. Do you have that number, or was that even a beeple? I don't think it was a beeple.
I don't even, I think he wanted, I didn't get a full read on his amendment, but he had 36 in favor and 136 opposed to his amendment, and I didn't get a full read on what that was. I was freezing and I couldn't write.
So the amendment came very much later in the day, but I want to go back to Lisa and I's conversation with listening to Jim. I voted no to the I voted no to resolution 5 at all the way to the end. And Lisa voted, I suspect Lisa voted yes. I don't know, you don't have to out yourself if you don't want to.
Yes, I did.
So Lisa and I were really engaged in, I think, a fruitful conversation. Your take really, Lisa, was we're providing support, and it's almost like you likened it to a union, like a union support behind people doing ministry in this space. Is that a fair summary? And please add.
Yes, and I think the resolution doesn't require us to burn our bridge with Kairos. It was to give, since we're a legislative type entity, it would give us the authorization to represent that the Episcopal Church had issues with what they were doing, so that it urges the convention to address the issue, and then it urges, if that proves to be fruitless, then it urges people to look at alternatives for that ministry, but it doesn't light anything particularly on fire at this point.
Yeah, so I think I like the way you put that, Lisa. And my sort of bias, my kind of why I voted no was there was a real strong sense that we got to get this to General Convention. We got to get it into the next year's legislative agenda. Personally, I couldn't figure out what the rush was. Like, why General Convention should be, why is this necessary right now for this at this time? So it felt like we'd had months, not years, to think about this. And while I completely support trans inclusion and trans rights and advocacy for all people, non-binary, etc., I still have, even though it passed dramatically. Like, Lisa, what was the final with the friendly amendment was like 90%, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was an amendment to add a proposal for new ministries that passed 166-14. Then Jim Ward had an amendment that failed 36-136, and then it finally passed 156-21.
Yeah, so it even though participation had gone down by the end of the day, it was overwhelmingly approved resolution 5, right? Mm-hmm. So those who were concerned, which I count myself as one of them, were like thinking, first of all, do we need to rush it to convention? I don't think so. Does it need to be dealt with right this second without maybe a year to talk about it and kind of get all the players into the room to talk to Kairos ministers, to have a chance to talk to maybe national leaders for Kairos, to kind of find out more of the people and the players. I talked to the priest in San Rafael. He's deeply involved in San Quentin, and kind of like, I still think he voted no for it. So I'd really like to have all those people in a room where all voices could be heard more deeply. Again, this is my opinion, didn't feel like the legislative body of the Diocese of California and the 174th Convention could give it its due pastoral, legislative, actionable care. Again, that's my take on it. And I really want to, Lisa and I kind of have slightly different opinions. And I want to hear what questions you have about it, because this was the hottest part of the convention, yes. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I voted no, and I put out my reasoning on this, which was primarily developed in the conversations that we had at lunchtime with Jim Ward. His amendment, which would have changed my opinion of the resolution, was one more which was not well presented by Jim or to the delegates. One, I think, due to time, but his amendment was one that encouraged conversations between the Episcopal Church and Kairos to develop something different. And his concern was that by passing this amendment, we are potentially excluding ourselves from Kairos by just because they're going to say it was a slap in the face at Kairos, and as a consequence, we might be excluded from doing any kind of ministry with Kairos on this. That bothered me. It also bothered me that the Kairos has a rather large prison ministry that the Episcopal Church does not have. So we're sort of piggybacking on their work in developing a prison ministry. In his view, is a lengthy process. And as a consequence, if we were cutting out of it, we were getting too tied up in our own values and not saying. And to me, I felt being there provides an opportunity for the Holy Spirit to operate. He didn't see any opposition to or any LGBTQ plus issues with the ministry that was being done with a large number of incarcerated people who are LGBTQ. And as a consequence, I didn't see the value of presenting and doing this resolution other than it was satisfying the opinions and experiences of one woman. And that bothered me, that it didn't seem like it was too quickly done and not well thought out.
Well, I like that's a really good perspective. And I think Lisa does even though several of us saying we voted no, Lisa does represent the majority opinion. And I think the reason behind it, she represents the majority opinion. And I'm thinking, because I see John in this room with us who does prison ministry, which I suspect this is probably why you're here to be part of this conversation. My commitment to you is that we want to affirm your ministry until we are told, get out, until I'm told. And this resolution was not saying get out. It was beginning to Lisa's point earlier. It's beginning a conversation that's going to be a long evolving conversation. So my commitment as the priest is that, I affirm your ministry, John, and I will keep you up to date as things change around this issue as Resolution 5 evolves. Hopefully, as people get more involved at the round table of conversation.
Can I just say a few things, real simple? That's what I was at the meeting where this whole thing came, and it didn't strike me that day that a bomb had gone off. My hearing aids aren't the best. I didn't quite hear it, but in my conversations with the state chair and got his side, I think it'd probably be good, as it appears that they want to have more looking at this, if they bring in the state chair and explain more, as I did with Todd, of what he said was the focus of that meeting, of the context, that it'd be for a more productive way forward, whatever that is supposed to be. And I don't think that happened. I don't think they talked to the state chair and how do you understand what that conversation was and the parameters, and there's a lot here, so if they want to continue, if the resolution was to say, we want to look further in this at the General Convention and have a more studied analysis, I think that'd be helpful. Totally. Because then it's like, you can almost hear both sides, but you can see what was the context. And there was a very narrow context for what happened at the meeting, apparently, according to the state chair. Because I've had long conversations with him, hours of conversation with the state chairman. And because, so in that sense, if the resolution that passed was to want to have a more discussion and maybe make some decision down the road, I think that'd be helpful, because I think it would clear the air and we could see the issues wherever the church wants to go.
Absolutely.
I think, there's a lot here that I sense wasn't really gone into. But
What I really appreciate about Lisa and the majority opinion, the 90% opinion. So like I'm representing not a tiny fraction of the perspective. But that if we as a convention and a diocese say these are values that we hold to, individual ministers can bring those values forward knowing they're not alone. So the real value, I think, the value I take out of this resolution is that we're saying the Diocese of California has your back to advocate for inclusion in your ministry, in the prison context, and that my prayer is that the conversation keeps going, right? So it's not just, oh, wow, we passed some resolutions, and this you'll say about this. I think, Lisa, you're going to say something in a second. We don't just pass 5 resolutions, throw them in the books and forget about them, because we kind of do that. So my hope and prayer for 5 is that it supports the individual ministers. The Diocese of California has some values that you can hold on to, and that we continue this conversation well past General Convention, because interreligious work, interfaith work, and prison work is really critical, I think, to who we are. I hope that we kind of live the words of Jesus, and when you're sick and in prison, you get visited by the people, right? And Susan, I know you've been listening. Do you have anything to add? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, I was the one that gave John the heads up that there was an issue in the first place, and John shared with me. So I was against this being taken out of context right from the beginning. But anybody I spoke with didn't want to hear about it, and so that was troubling to me. And the fact that one priest said that the Kairos couldn't meet in their church anymore. None of that context came up with that resolution. And I think that what we were pushing back is wait, slow down. Ministry is happening. People's lives are being changed. And that is the perspective that slowing down offers, that we need to hear one another. And so when I voted no, or spoke with people earlier, and unless you knew someone that was doing prison ministry who had a bigger breadth, people said this is wrong. It was my perspective.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm very aware that even though we are some people who've been speaking, Jim, myself, and Susan, kind of represent a minority opinion, I don't want to seem like that you don't have a voice in this. So have we summarized both your perspective and our perspective? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think wrapped in this controversy is a real gift that I think calls us to a deeper conversation. And, we're talking about the prison ministers when the real parties affected by this are the prisoners. And, if there's a way to get input from people who are affected by the ministry of Kairos, people who are in prison and LGBTQ, because basically we're passing the immigration resolution with all of the good intent, but without the input of the people that are immigrants. So I think, I think what happens with something like this is everybody has really, really good intentions. And how we connect those intentions to action, how we connect those intentions to each other, I think is really important. And I think this is a really amazing opportunity to have some really deep and honest conversations with a really wide variety of people who are impacted by this and people who may be energized by this conversation.
Lovely. That's a really helpful addition. Okay, so we've covered the resolutions, we've passed the budget, we've talked about the different speakers, we've told about the surprise speakers. Is there broad strokes? Like, I can't get into, I don't want to get into the legislative weeds, but have we covered the broad strokes, delegates and clergy? It looks like we have, because you're all like looking silently at the down from the cameras.
Well, Neil may be looking at us questioningly, but we can't tell.
Um, so Neil, I know you're probably just watching, and maybe you're on your walking or on your phone or whatever. If you have any questions or thoughts or reflections, oh, you're there. Hello. You need to unmute, Neil. We can't hear you.
I just have my camera off to not mess around with bandwidth in case that's an issue. So
Cool. Do you have any thoughts, reflections, or questions? I want to give you space too, since you had taken the time to show up.
yeah, no, I think this last item you're talking about is the one that was probably the most interesting to me as far as coming up at convention. And I think it's a difficult topic because I do believe, and John and I have talked about this also. I do believe, based on the information that was shared, well, first of all, it seems to me that resolution was really rushed. From the time that I first became aware of it, where DialCal published it in their weekly newsletter, which I thought was a really strange way to make that issue visible. And the DialCal article also already had a action. So it was like, there's been no discussion, no visibility to the issue or the question, and it's already being pushed as an action item. So I felt like it was rushed. It probably, I would agree with you, Todd. I think, I don't know where it will end up as far as resolution, but I did believe that it needed more discussion before action was taken. And so I wasn't comfortable with that as a resolution. That's enough.
Thank you. That's helpful, Neil. Carrie, I know you're probably not going to come off camera, but if you want to come off mute, do you have any questions? I know you're listening and probably working at Peace or something. And I see it looks like either Kimberly or somebody's on parish admin.
That's Sally.
I see Sally. I see her smiling face. Sally, do you have any questions or thoughts or observations?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm
Helen
glad
Coleman?
I have to vote.
Helen Coleman, do you have any final
No,
thoughts?
I've been listening to Jim all week. I just wanted to get more information on the last issue too. I think working with somebody an organization to change their mind is one thing, but I'd hate to see bowing out completely to because of one small point, a lot of people would suffer. So that's just my thoughts on that, which has pretty well been covered.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think let's see, can't join right now. Oh, so Carrie just said in the chat, we covered her questions she had, so she's not gonna join us verbally.
Oh, Sally's got a question.
Yeah, Sally.
So I would think that information on the new Saints Day should get shared with the parish somehow.
I saw your email, Sally. We'll definitely put that in the next tidings.
Right.
For April 10th. So yes, good. Point well taken.
Well, also, in terms of the resolutions, the resolution committee put a lot of work into these, a lot of consideration. And my concern in joining the resolution committee was the difficulty in locating existing resolutions.
Yeah, right.
What do we have? What don't we have? What should be perhaps revoked? All sorts of things. So I've pushed, and they've agreed to make a priority for the beginning of the year to go through, locate the resolutions, B, go through them, index them, and put them in a format in which parishes can access them. People who are interested in a particular subject can see what has the church said before. And several of the people that proposed these 5 resolutions were concerned with, well, what do we have on the books now? And nobody could say. So kind of a eye-opening and shocking thing for me when I joined the committee, but I think it's a real opportunity to kind of re-energize the process, and there has been a real push to make all current resolutions something that would be usable by any individual Episcopalian in their own personal ministry. So I think that will be something that's going forward. And then some input in the next year as to what we've got now and how it can be used.
Great. Can I ask you one follow-up question? This is a question of ignorance, but does the nominating committee report out like the 5 resolutions as fait accompli? I mean, are they done? And then they say, like, is there a post-convention report that's specific to the nominating committees, or just a general convention report saying all this happened? Or is there a report at all? I mean, I don't honestly know.
Regarding the resolutions,
Right, regarding like what the legislative actions that we took, the 174th convention, what's the follow-up documentation that's required of you guys as a nominating committee, or is that off your plate?
it's off our plate now. It's in the hands of the convention people. But I think we can go into ongoing conversations around things like Kairos and do the work behind that. I think the people that actually physically take it to general convention would be open to amendments at that point. So I think that the time pressure was most strong in just getting this on the table for discussion. I don't think the proponents are necessarily viewing it as 100% done deal. I think they would be open to much more information and much more conversation.
Oh,
You know, Lisa, I think the thing that had me concerned was when I saw the article in DialCal newsletter, and it included in there actions already taken by the church that hosted the meeting where this controversy arose. So it felt like an article that was proposing a course of action. It wasn't just saying we have this issue. It seems to be a conflict between our values and another organization's values, and we need to align them somehow.
Mhm.
And the article in DialCal was strange to me. I have never seen an article like that, where the first time you are aware of the issue at the diocesan level, there's already a course of action.
well, I'll clarify.
I
one
haven't
thing.
seen that article, so.
I can clarify. I did read the article, and my understanding, and I want Susan to chime in and correct me because she's going to keep me on track. But my understanding was it was San Leandro and Grace Martinez who took unilateral prerogative, which they have. That this is not irregular. A priest can say, "I don't want you here," and with the consent of the vestry, they can kick people off as they see fit. So I think it was 2 people, as they saw themselves, leading the charge, but I don't think it was diocesan approved, even if it did come out in diocesan newsletter. I don't think DialCal was saying, hey, Grace Martinez and I forgot his church, Justin's church. What's that church's name in San Leandro?
All Saints.
All Saints.
Yeah.
All
I
Saints.
don't think they were saying All Saints and Martinez are doing this on behalf of the diocese. This was them seeing an issue, responding as they saw to the pastoral needs of their local community. So I hear what you're saying, Neil. I do. It seemed like it was a fait accompli and they ha, but I do think those 2 communities were acting, and please correct me. What do you think? Tell me, Susan, if you think that's a misread.
You know,
I think, and John would probably know better, but I do think All Saints intended it to be a call to action, and that we're not going to do this, and that and that Deb followed through. I do think it meant that it was a done deal.
Yeah, Todd, when I read the article, it was a strange kind of article, and the way it was formatted, and what I took the message to be that it was trying to communicate, is a strange type of article to see in DialCal. So
Well, it's stranger to be in the Episcopal News Service.
well, but it's I agree with Susan. I read it as a call to action, that we've had a problem and we've got congregations that have already taken action, and we need to do it. And, I mean, it just felt like
The vibe.
you needed more discussion before publishing something in that format. It doesn't mean they shouldn't have published something. They could have.
Hmm.
DialCal could have published an article that said, we've become aware of a discrepancy or difference between what we believe as far as inclusion for everyone and one of the organizations that we believe is performing great services to the community. And we need to work through those differences. It didn't say that. It just,
Good point.
this person said that, and because of that, these two congregations have done this. And I just read and I said, what is this? Why is this the first time I've ever seen something on this topic phrased this way in DialCal?
Mhm. Point taken. I think that's a point well taken. So what I want to leave us with is the sense that if this is something that's meaningful to you, you pray for it. When you can, show up to it. Be intentional about including people in conversation who may or may not be currently at the table. And this is nowhere close to done. And my commitment, until I get sort of a papal bull, I know they don't exist in the Episcopal Church, but until we're said legislatively, parishes of the Diocese of California can no longer do business with Kairos in any form or fashion, cannot endorse volunteers to be part of Kairos. I really want us to consider them being part of us until more conversation is had. And if the Diocese of California says we, with careful consideration and General Convention deliberation, want Kairos no longer be part of our communion, then I will be in line with that, but not until then.
I say thank you. And that means, as I understand it, that if Kairos had volunteers that said they would like to be able to meet in our space, and we have an active person that is involved in Kairos, we would say, yes, you may meet here.
That's what I'm saying. And if any of you come to this thing and you say you want to come to vestry and sort of bring this issue to vestry, I do want this to be not just my personal opinions versus your personal opinions. I want it to be an intentional, deliberate conversation. And then Jim, we're gonna take Jim, and then we're gonna stop.
I had a question on something else.
Oh, sure.
Which was the report, and I wanted the knowledge from the clergy, and that was on the previous convention had passed a resolution regarding clergy housing, and being that basically I feel the diocese is built up of parishes, and parishes thrive or don't thrive without clergy. And we had a great big problem in housing clergy in general. We're fortunate that we don't have that. But
I think that's beyond the scope of this conversation.
I'm wondering what that report, what have you heard from your cohorts and parishes regarding that report that came out from the previous convention?
I've heard nothing. What about you, Susan? I mean, I've heard people talk about it.
Yeah, but that's a discussion that is not able to do this. It's complicated.
So let's have a more, I think the scope of reporting on 174 is that's it. But I honestly, Jim, I've heard lots of conversations about it, but I cannot speak with knowledge. And when Lisa Perry and the nominating team builds out the library for us to do our research, then we'll have everything we need to know.
The only thing that they talked about was most clergy don't prefer clergy housing, and that they need guidelines for clergy compensation, and wanted more discussion around proceeds of sales of church property and how that would be utilized potentially.
Yeah, so I appreciate your perspective, Jim, but I think that's 173 is beyond the scope of this reporting for 174. And my pledge to you all is if I know more about clergy housing, I'll tell you about it, but I don't know anything right now as far as concrete action that was taken as a result of 173 in 174.
I haven't read their report, so I don't know what it was. And
Um,
the other thing that I would really like to have is a similar discussion as to this one and the previous one, with regards to the bishop candidates after the
Absolutely.
previous.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I really enjoyed both the pre-meeting and you all showing up, and I've really enjoyed this. And so I think I want to build that into the way we do business. So after the meet and greets and before the bishop's election on December 2nd, I'd love to do this again and then do it again after the election. So have a pre and a post electing convention, because I really do want you all to have a sense, and we'll do it this way. I think this works. We'll record it, we'll put it on the website, and so that, you know, people can be a little bit more informed and not feel like, to what Lisa said, we don't just have a bunch of meetings, make a bunch of resolutions, and then forget about them. All right, y'all, it is almost 1 o'clock. I want to adjourn this meeting. I really appreciate you all showing up. And Lisa, thank you for keeping us all on track for the vote counts. That was I loved it. Not only your contributions to the conversation, but that level of reporting was really interesting to me.
Thank you. And I'd like to wish everybody a happy All Saints Day and a
All
happy
Saints.
Dia de los Inocentes Day.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, y'all have a good
Yeah.
week. See you soon.
Thanks.
Let's stop recording.